Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. This is Reverend Dr. Sherry Ella Jackson of the Preachers Academy. Welcome tonight. It has been a long time since we have gathered in this space, but we are headed to Pentecost, and I just thought it was, as they say, we need to pay attention to the life of the church, right? The important um, dates in the life of the church. I contend, and I have seen it, that we spend lots of time on days. We invest in anniversary days like the pastor's anniversary and usher's anniversary and all of the pew rallies and all of these things. And then when it gets to the life of the church, we tend to forget, or we act as if they don't come around. So, speaking of anniversaries, we are on our way to Pentecost, right? We are on our way to Pentecost. Sunday is the birthday, if you want to speak, of the church, because the church was birthed on Pentecost. So come on in, and after you are here, would you like, share, tag, bring someone in from your circle, your clique, or your crew? And let's get into this. Again, it is good to be here. It's been a while since we have been here in this space. So many things are changing, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. But for right now, we are going to begin our 3-day series. So tonight, Wednesday, and Thursday, the road to Pentecost, the road to Pentecost. And I am calling this 3 days, three sacred movements in the life of Jesus, three sacred movements in the life of Jesus. And as we go through this, you're going to see that it is not only in the life of Jesus, but it is also in our lives. It is also in our lives. So welcome. Come on in and greet me and let me know that you are here. So tonight, I told you there was three movements, three sacred movements, and we're going to talk about them. Tonight we're going to begin with death, the sacred movement of death. But before we get there, I want to set the stage. I want to give us context to help us to begin our journey, to help us to begin our journey. So let's talk about, first of all, what I mean when I am talking about a sacred movement. What am I talking about when I talk about a sacred movement? Sacred movements are internal and external shifts that carry divine weight. It is a turning point in your life when it is an indication that something has changed internally and externally, and it is going to change the trajectory of your life. These are spiritual turning points where God reveals, where God heals, where God calls or transforms. I don't know about you, but I have had many sacred movements. I have had many shifts that carry divine weight. Shifts that change my total being. Shifts that change who I am as a person, my belief systems. We call them evolving, right? But these are sacred movements. These are major turning points in your life where you know without a shadow of doubt that you have made a major turn in your life. Now, these sacred moments can be loud like fire, or they may be silent like grief, right? They may be loud or they may be silent. These sacred moments can look like endings, but they may lead to new beginnings. They can look like endings, but lead to new beginnings. They are moments where the veil is thin and something holy breaks through. I hope that you by now are thinking about the times in your life where there has been a shift that carried divine weight. There was some type of shift, a movement in your life where you knew immediately that life had changed for you. They can be loud, as we're talked about, or they can be silent. They may look like endings, but they lead to new beginnings. These are moments that something holy has broken through. So I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about the life of Jesus, but I want you to think about your own life where there has been a sacred movement. There has been a major shift in your life, and that shift carried divine weight. So, what do these sacred movements look like, right? What do these sacred movements look like? Let's think about in the life of Jesus. When Jesus is on the cross, it seems that he is bowing his head at the cross, right? In surrender, but not defeat. He has surrendered to the cross. He has surrendered to this death, but he is not defeated. The cross is a sacred movement in the life of Jesus. What looked like surrender, what looked like defeat, right, was surrender. Another sacred movement we can find in Jesus' feet lifting up off the ground in ascension, right? In departure. For some, it may have looked like abandonment, but Jesus is simply, he's ascending, it's a departure and not an abandonment. Right? The wind and the fire at Pentecost, it comes through and it looks like disruption, right? But this disruption births power. This disruption births power. They are led or held by the Spirit, talking about sacred movements, right? Are held or led by the Spirit. These are spirit moves, right? These are spiritual moves. These are spiritual turning points to transform you from the inside out. To transform you from the inside out. Sacred movements shake something loose, right? Whether it is pride, grief, shame, silence, or control. Sacred movements shake things. They disrupt things, right? But at the same time, this disruption births power for your next move. I hope that you are catching what I'm putting down. I hope that you are catching what I'm putting down. Welcome if you are just joining me. I am Dr. Sherry, and we are beginning our 3 nights of looking at sacred movement. Sacred movement. And so we're talking about a sacred movement is a major shift that carries divine weight. Again, I think about in your own life a major turning point, whether it was a decision that you had to make, and this decision was going to cause you, or it caused you to let something go in order to get something, right? To let something go in order to get something. So Jesus bowing his head at the cross, while on the cross, for some, it may have looked like defeat, but it was surrender. It was him giving in to the circumstances that he was dealt, but not in defeat. Not in defeat. So, what are the three sacred movements in the life of Jesus? There is death, which is going to be our focus tonight. There is death, what we must release in order to rise. I just want to, I just need to know if somebody's here with me. Give me a thumbs up, say amen, say ouch, say something. Let me know that you are here. But one of the sacred movements in the life of Jesus, and we should take heed to, is death. And not just a physical death. It may be a spiritual death, an emotional death, a mental. It is something that we must release in order to rise. Think about the seed that goes in the ground. That seed must die. That seed must be buried in order to rise. The second one is departure. How we live in the tension of the transition. That's that in between time, right? And we're going to talk about in this movement tomorrow night. We're going to talk about the ascension. What do we do in the meantime? What do we do in this transition? And then the third one is divine fire. The courage to speak and move in spirit-filled power. So there is death, there is departure, and there is divine fire. There is divine fire. So let's talk about death, right? Let's talk about death. And we're gonna, and so if you know the Easter story, you know the story of Jesus' death in the Luke version of Luke 23, 26 through 49. I'm not going to read that, but I implore you to. Luke 23, 26 through 49, that talks about the crucifixion of Jesus. And so when we're talking about death, right, we're talking about it in a as a metaphor. We're talking about it as a metaphor. And when I was looking at the word and going through this whole thing about death, the ancients would have seen death as an unfeeling person. Unfeeling, one who can no longer feel, right? One who can no longer feel. All the feeling, all the breath, everything is gone, right? So death is a metaphor of release. So when you think about when a person dies in the physical, there is a final breath, right? There is a final release. So we are seeing death as a metaphor for release. Death represents letting go. Death represents letting go of whatever. Catch this. Whatever no longer serves you well. Death, let's say it again, is letting go of whatever people, place, or thing no longer serves your becoming. I'll say that again. Death represents letting go of whatever or whomever no longer serves your becoming your next. So that could mean limiting beliefs about God, that you are letting go of the box that you have put God in. You're limiting belief about yourself or about others. Limiting your, letting go of belief systems that no longer allow you or serve you well in your becoming. What else? Letting go of harmful systems like patriarchy, racism, sexism, homophobias, or religious legalism. Let's say this again. Death as a metaphor of letting go of harmful systems and practices like patriarchy, racism, or sexism. Hey, letting go of the need for approval, for perfectionism or silence. I was telling someone the other day that perfectionism is a dream killer. We will never reach perfection. And so what, always striving to get perfection in this case, this person was writing a book and they could, and I listen, I've been there because it took me 10 years to write my first book. Why? Because I wanted every phrase to be turned just right. Right? And I talk about it all the time about when I am applying makeup, right? And I can never get my eyebrows right. And it could take me, it can make me late from work trying to reach perfection, and you never get the eyebrows straight. So I have to get to what's good enough. And I want to suggest tonight that many of us need to let go and to release this idea of perfection and get to what's good enough. We also need to let go of past identities we've outgrown or were never ours to begin with. I need to just park right there. That many of us need to let go of the identities, the narratives that were given to us by people, places, things. Even they may have been well meaning when doing so. Our parents, from the time we are born, they create these narratives for us. And then when we do not live into those narratives, sometimes they call us rebellious. Sometimes they say we don't want to listen to anyone. No, what we are trying to become is the person God has created us. And sometimes that means letting go of someone else's narrative of us. So just as Jesus surrendered his will and body on the cross, we are invited to surrender the things that we cling to, even the ones we spiritualize, and make space for freedom, for growth, and for authenticity, being authentic. The scripture says in John 12 and 24, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. It's useless, right? It is useless. I wish I had a witness tonight. I just wish I had one witness tonight. The second thing we need to know about death, it is a metaphor for transformation. It is a metaphor for transformation. Death in this context isn't the end. It's the threshold. It's the threshold that allows us to move from one thing to another. It's a metaphor it's a moment between who we were and who we are becoming. Who we were and who we are becoming. Death is a metaphor for transformation. So again, Jesus' death is not about defeat. It's a portal to the next. So yes, the cross is both a site of grief, but it is also a womb for the next. Right? The grave serves as a womb for the next. So, what is that saying to us? How can we see this transformation? The death of a relationship can birth a clearer sense of identity. The death of a career path can ignite a purpose-driven calling. I just remember many, if you haven't been around me to know that I went to school. My undergrad is in journalism. I spent 20-something years as a journalist, right? As a news reporter, as an editor, as a publisher. And the last iteration was I published a newspaper, The Light, a bi-monthly newspaper targeted to the African American community in central Louisiana. There came a time when I could no longer do the newspaper. I was crushed. I'm like, why is it every time I get to a point that things are finally looking up and things are going well, I finally had an opportunity to do this, to live this dream, and I had to stop. And these are the words that God said. I never told you it was forever. I promised that you were going to be able to do it. I didn't say how long, right? And from that moment when I stopped doing the newspaper, I then got into seminary, and then the whole life changed from there. It was not a failure, right? It was not a defeat, but it was a change in career path. There was not a death, but me no longer being able to do the newspaper was a portal. It was a door that got me to my next. Think about your own life. What is it? What is it that you need to release in order to get to your purpose, in order to get to your next? Now, here's something. The death of religious certainty can lead to spiritual depth and freedom. This is something that many Christians, many church folks do not want to give into, this concept of certainty. And what that says is there is no room for God to work the way God wants to work in this season in your life. Why? Because you have put God in a box based upon how God worked before. And we ought to know by now that God does not work the same way. But we miss God looking for God to move the way God moved before. Dying in this sense is a pathway to liberation, not punishment, but process. But process. The third thing that we could see when it comes to death as a metaphor is a solidarity with Christ. Jesus wasn't just a substitution, but his death was a demonstration of divine solidarity with human suffering. With human suffering. So God is showing us and reminding us what it means to feel abandoned, to feel broken, and to feel betrayed. Because indeed, on the cross, Jesus felt abandoned. My God, why have you forsaken me? Right? God, through Jesus, lets us know that Jesus had a sense of betrayal. My God, we go through or we experience betrayal all the time, whether it's a person, place, or a thing. Death as a metaphor to be in solidarity with Christ shows that we are not alone in our dying, whether it is physical, emotional, or spiritual. So the cross becomes a companion, not just a symbol. So when we think about Jesus' death, right, it is rooted in injustice. Jesus got to the cross because he disrupted systems. He told the people, he told the authority, he told the Roman government, he told the elite people about themselves. And they could not have him upsetting what they had going on. So Jesus' death is rooted in injustice, in empire, and public shame. It reveals this death reveals the depth of divine love and God's willingness to experience human pain. And of course, it's liberative. It is liberating because, as we said before, it disrupts the power structures of evil, death, and control. Of evil. So I hope that you are thinking about your own life, because here is the question. Here is the question. What in your life needs to die? What in your life? Are you willing to put it in the comment section? What in your life needs to die so that you will have release, so that you will have transformation? What in your life? We understand Jesus' life, but what in your life needs to die? What needs to die so that you can live freely? What are you carrying that Jesus has already surrendered? Where are you standing at the cross moment? Facing losses, but holding space for something. What is it that you need to release so that you can walk in the freedom of your next? Right? In the freedom of your next. What is it that you need to do? So, let's talk a little bit more. The cross is a mirror, right? So if you know anything, if you've been around church any amount of time, good to have you, Pastor Bianca. If you've been around church any amount of time, you know that the cross and crucifixion, as they say, was on a hill, right? It was placed in a position where it is public view. It is public view where everybody could see who was being crucified. So the cross exposes everything, right? When Jesus is on that cross, Jesus is visible, fully vulnerable. There's nothing hidden. You see everything, right? And so the cross exposes things like fear, betrayal, injustice, truth. Remember, we're talking about letting go of. So what needs to die? So the cross exposes. When you're out there on that cross, on the hill, right? In a place where anybody, wherever you were, you would be able to see. And so this is what we are seeing when it comes to our own lives. The cross shows us what must be confronted in ourselves and in systems around us. What must be confronted? What must be on public display? Right? So what is it that we need to kill off? That's the question. What is it that we need to kill off? So the cross is a mirror. The cross is a mirror. So here's a time of reflection. What truth is the cross exposing in your life right now? What truth is the cross exposing in your life right now? Because again, it makes no, we understood what it meant for Jesus, but what does it mean for you? If you were on public display, if you were hanging on the cross, what would be exposed? What would be the thing that needs to be killed off or crucified? Right? We always talk about the external, but what about the internal? What about the hatred? What about the systems and practices that we engage in? What is it that we need to crucify? What would people see about you if you were on the cross? Now, this is what the cross requires presence. So we remember the story, right? That the women were at the foot of the cross. The women did not flee. The women did not flee. They stayed. The women stayed. Their presence wasn't loud, but it was holy and revolutionary. Why do you say that, Dr. Sherry? I say that because women, you know the story, they were not even considered, right? And so they stayed as an act of revolution to say, you will see me. We are going to stay here. We're going to stay here until the end. They didn't flee. They stayed there. When systems would have wanted them to run, they stayed there. And it also shows that staying in the pain or staying in the moment, not always running away from, is sacred resistance. Not necessarily running away from it, but sitting in the uncomfortable pain of it, right? So it requires presence. It requires presence. The women did not leave. They stayed there until the end. They stayed there until the end. And we know that what happened at the end because they stayed. We know as they say, we know the rest of the story, right? Because they stayed. So again, ask yourself, when have I remained faithful in hard places? When have I remained faithful in hard places, and what has it taught me? What has it taught me? When have you stayed in a hard place, and what has it taught you? Because we are not always able to run from it, right? We are not always able to run from it or get away from it. We have to go through it in order to get on the what? To get on the other side. But also, the cross is a doorway. The cross is a doorway. Jesus didn't fight the cross because he knew resurrection was coming. He understood that the cross, that death was not the end of his story. He understood that death was not the end of his story. That Sunday morning was coming. And I want to suggest tonight that Sunday morning still come. I don't know where you find yourself in life. Sunday morning is coming. Don't give up in the fight. Don't give up thinking that the Friday is the end of your story. But here's another thing that we need to get. That sometimes we hold on to things God is calling us to bury. I'm going to pinch my own self. That sometimes we hold on to things that God is calling us to bury. So death makes space for transformation and not erasure. Death makes space for transformation and not erasure. It may look like one thing is ending, which it may be, which it is, but at the same time, something is beginning. Something is beginning. So here's the question. What am I afraid to let go of, even though it no longer brings me life? I just need to let that sit a minute. What is it that you're afraid to let go of, even though it no longer brings you life? It no longer serves you well. And again, this may be a person, it may be a place, or it may be a thing. When it no longer serves you, when it no longer allows you to become. And so you become stuck where you are because you refuse to let go of it. Whether it's a relationship, whether it is a career, whether it is a place, whatever that thing is. What is it? A belief system. Many of us are holding on to belief systems because our grandma told it to us. We learned it in vacation Bible school and we've never evolved. We learned it in Sunday school when we were in the 5th grade primary class, but it is no longer serving you well. And really what it has you in is in bondage. What is that thing that you're holding on to that you really need to let go of, but you refuse to? And so tonight, I just want to leave you with this. And I'm out of here. May you embrace the sacred movement, the holy shift of death. Because we can't get to Pentecost. We can't get to the divine fire. We can't get to the power without the death. May we understand that death is not the end, but it is a doorway. We are not here to rush past pain. We are here to honor it, learn from it, and ask what it's trying to teach us. What is it trying to teach us? Let's rethink. Let's restore. Let's reimagine death not being the end, but the beginning. The death is a metaphor for transformation. And it also allows us to stand in solidarity with Jesus, who experienced human suffering, abandonment, injustice, betrayal. And so, as we look forward to tomorrow night, our second movement of this 3-day sacred movement is departure. So tomorrow we'll be dealing with ascension and the sacredness of transition. A lot of us want to get to Pentecost, but we don't want the transition. And so I pray that you will join me at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, June 4th. That's tomorrow night. That is Wednesday night, right here. So my prayer is that your journey be well.